Thank you for being you, and thank you for joining. Let me go ahead and put on some of this DMCA safe music. Hashtag from Moobert. I'm gonna go ahead and just do some study beats lo-fi for today. For just a little bit at least. Yeah, something like that. Okay. I'm gonna try to keep an eye on the chat. And I've got an external monitor this time, so hopefully the process will work a lot smoother this time around. Sweet. Okay. I just checked on my Facebook page and I am indeed live. Cool. All right, so now I'm gonna open the chat. Sweet. All right, let's go ahead and get started officially, shall we? I'm gonna kick it off with a 3-minute chess game here. Let's go ahead and play. Okay, so try to go with a d4 opening. Okay. Yeah. Sweet. Okay. Not yet. Let's just go ahead and take that. What I've been experimenting with lately is castling on the opposite side of wherever the opponent castles. That way it's just slightly easier to coordinate some action. Sometimes. Probably go here. Or there. Or there. Or that. That also works. Okay, so now what I'm gonna want to do is probably something like this. Want to open this up to where that king is. Okay. Still getting used to do it on the computer. I'm more used to doing it on the phone. Okay, so move your queen there. We'll take that. Okay. Check. Okay. I'll probably move his pawn there, perhaps, or take this. Either way. Okay. Alright. And just move that there. So that I can protect b2. Never underestimate a good pawn. All pawns are good, by the way. Okay, so now I'm gonna go here. Just poke a little at that rook. And then poke a little at this rook. Prep for that. Okay. probably want to move that rook right now. Okay. So he's going for that mate, which I should have prepared for. But not to worry. Not to worry. Just go here. Okay. All right. This is Close Calls with Weston. Let's see if I can make the most of this next 25 seconds. Okay. And we'll just go here for now. Okay. 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 All right. All right. Or momentarily had a rematch there, but I guess that went away. All right. So let's go ahead and take a little bit of break from the chess here and dive into some of the subject matter for today's contemplation. Okay. So I'm going to bring up some of my notes. Last time I had brought up some quotes that I started writing up on my notes about a year ago, and then I shared those via Facebook also a year ago. And those were some select quotes from like church fathers and such. So I had considered starting with continuing reading those quotes because I didn't finish all of them. I'd also considered including some Pac-Man. And I considered, the other day, I listened to the pilot episode of the All My Love podcast. You can find it on YouTube and Spotify. And Sophia and Natalia run this. I know Sophia from Cal State San Marcos. I was able to go to some literature and writing classes where we both happened to be in the same classes, and she's a lovely person, and this is a fantastic podcast, so I encourage you to check it out. I was also thinking about including a segue from their subject matter to the topic of universal music, which is not the name of the publication company. It's a doctrine. Musica Universalis is the Latin title. And then segue into cymatics. But instead, I'll just give you an invitation to my Discord group where I have shared some meditations that I also shared with another literature and writing studies major who I know from Cal State San Marcos. And her name's Nikki. She's fantastic. And then I was thinking about connecting all this to a recent conversation that Zachary Levi had on the Michael Rosenbaum show, but that's also something that you can find in this one meditation in my Discord group. So I encourage you to join my Discord group. Invitations are open, so everybody can come in, and no time limits on the invitations for the moment. So, yeah. Also, I was going to tie it into folks like Zig Ziglar and Napoleon Hill and so on. But anyway, let's just go ahead and get into the actual subject matter for today's podcast, which is politics. And I want to ask you, what is politics? What comes to mind when you think about that term? Probably, if you watch a lot of cultural discourse nowadays in terms of like presidential debates and so on, you'll probably be thinking of a lot of ad hominem attacks and a lot of backstabbing and a lot of name calling and lots of, may I say, nasty stuff like that. But I'd like us to step back just a little bit, calm down, and think about this a little bit more carefully. So, one way to approach this is by consulting etymology, or the history of these terms. So, I would encourage us to start by taking a look at the etymology of politics. So let's go ahead and check out the online etymology dictionary entry for this. We begin with noting that since the 1520s or so, it has meant something like science and the art of government. But I think if we zoom in even more on the adjective, we should get a slightly better idea. We see a little bit of the old French term politique. Hopefully I'm saying that right. And it comes back to Latin, politicus, of the citizens or the state. And even further back, we go to the Greeks, and we have politikos, of citizens, and again, pertaining to the state, pertaining to public life, and so on. And this came from polis, city. So, just as a broad stroke, rough on the edges picture of politics, I'd like us to sort of think about politics as pertaining to the citizens. And so if we break it down further, that's you and you and you and you and hopefully me too. And so let's just work on it at that scale first. Of course, all this scales up to global conversations, but let's bring it down a little bit to you and I when we talk about politics to some degree. So I happen to be reading an article. I'm going to bring it up right here. This is called The Personal and the Political, Literature and Feminism by Megan Berendt. And this is from the International Socialist Review. So I was giving this article a read earlier today, and I wanted to pull out some quotes from there. I'm going to zoom in on this one so that hopefully you can see it a little bit better. Let's try to expand this if I can. Okay. So, at one point, the author was saying that there has been a shift in this catchphrase about the personal is political. She wrote, "This shift is perhaps nowhere more obvious than in Gloria Steinem's preface to Revolution from Within, a book of self-esteem, whose title alone gives expression to the profound retreat from the radical politics of the earlier feminist movement. In the preface, Steinem argues that it is time turned the feminist adage around from the personal is political to the political is personal." So, okay, I'd like you to put a bookmark in that. And I wanted to point out that later on in that same article, we read this bit, and I'll zoom in on it so that you can see a little bit better. So, later on in the article, the same author writes that as the movement in the streets declined, feminist writers who were also activists increasingly turned toward fiction as their primary and sometimes only means of enacting political change. I thought this was super interesting, but I'm going to continue the quotation before I comment on it. While the early movement had consciously rejected the possibility of personal solutions to collective problems, as collective struggle declined, a generation of newly radicalized women found themselves with a raised consciousness in a world that was still sexist to its core. So, tangentially, this reminds me of Dr. C.S. Lewis when he was talking about the relationship between mythos, or myths, and logos, or logic. I'm going to read this portion here from one of his essays, but since I know you can't see this little screenshot very well here, I'm going to go ahead and just go to this website, which has captured this for us. Thank you so much to people who do this sort of thing. So I'm going to be going to this part, the more lucidly we think. Yeah, this part. Okay, and then I'm gonna try zooming in a little bit more for us. About there should be fine. Right, so this is Dr. C.S. Lewis, and in one of his articles on myth became fact, he writes the following: the more lucidly we think, the more we are cut off. The more deeply we enter into reality, the less we can think. You cannot study pleasure in the moment of the nuptial embrace, nor repentance while repenting, nor analyze the nature of humor while roaring with laughter. But when else can you really know these things? If only my toothache would stop, I could write another chapter about pain. But once it stops, what do I know about pain? Of this tragic dilemma, myth is the partial solution. In the enjoyment of a great myth, we come nearest to experiencing as a concrete what can otherwise be understood only as an abstraction. At this moment, for example, I am trying to understand something very abstract indeed, the fading, vanishing of tasted reality as we try to grasp it with the discursive reason. Probably I've made heavy weather of it. By the way, if you're in California, it's been so windy and so rainy lately. I've loved it. But in this case, let's continue. If I remind you instead of Orpheus in Eurydice, how he was suffered to lead her by the hand, but when he turned around to look at her, she disappeared. What was merely a principle becomes imaginable. You may reply that you never till this moment attached that meaning to this myth. Of course not. You're not looking for an abstract meaning at all. If that was what you were doing, the myth would be for you no true myth, but a mere allegory. You were not knowing, but tasting. By the way, hashtag Pints with Aquinas. This is a great mug. All right, where was I? So, Dr. C.S. Lewis was saying, you were not knowing, but tasting. But what you were tasting turns out to be a universal principle. The moment we state this principle, we are admittedly back in the world of abstraction. It's only while receiving the myth as a story that you experience the principle concretely. When we translate, he says, we get abstraction, or rather, dozens of abstractions. what flows into you from the myth is not truth, but reality. Truth is always about something, but reality is that about which truth is. And therefore, every myth becomes the father of innumerable truths on the abstract level. Myth is the mountain whence all the different streams arise, which become truths down here in the valley. In hac valle abstractionis, that is. Or, if you prefer, myth is the isthmus which connects the peninsular world of thought with that vast continent we really belong to. It is not, like truth, abstract, nor is it, like direct experience, bound to the particular. Now, as myth transcends thought, incarnation transcends myth. The heart of Christianity is a myth which is also a fact. Now, you may or may not contest that last turn that Dr. C.S. Lewis was talking about. But you probably would agree with 90% of that quote, which I just presented for you. And again, what I had just been doing is saying that certain bits within this Internationalist Socialist Review article, which were talking about how feminist writers who were activists increasingly turned toward fiction as their primary and sometimes only means of enacting political change. That bit and this bit from C.S. Lewis seem to connect on a very deep level. There's something that happens in fiction and myth which at least spills out into the realm of so-called nonfiction or so-called real life. But at any rate, let's go ahead and backtrack to the political is personal idea. And before I get into that a little bit further, let's go back to playing some more chess, shall we? And I'm going to refresh the chat here, make sure that I haven't missed anybody commenting. Okay, looks like nobody's commented yet, so I think we're good to play another chess game. So let's go ahead and play some more chess. All right, I feel like doing a c4 opening. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and get down here. Yep. And sacrifice. Sometimes it needs to be done. Could take or a check, in which case I'll just take that there, and then he goes right here. I go here, probably, or that works too. Okay, so I'll go here. Come to think of it, thinking about Jeremy Selman's recommendation here, I really should have castled the other way around this time around, because partly my pawn structure is pointing this way, it's opening up there, partly because his pawn structure is opening all the way up over here. So, retrospectives, eh? Okay, so, let's see. I need to find a way to maybe get out of this situation a little bit. Nope, I don't want to do that. Let's see here. Well, I guess he's threatening mate anyway. He can just go there. Yeah. Okay, let's try another one. Do better for all of us. Okay. So he was attacking that. Now I'm attacking him here. Oh, that's interesting. I think he was probably thinking he could mate me there. Maybe? Not quite sure. Okay. Anyway, let's try another game. Okay. Let's do that. And go here. Okay. Okay. So yeah, pawn structure is opening up this way, so let's just go ahead and do this. You'll notice that his queen and bishop are pointing in this direction. So I'll probably want to do a check there at some point. There we go. Okay. Now I'm going to go up here, defend this piece a little bit. And then I'll probably want to put my rook on this open file here. He's probably wanting to move his rook over here, so here's what I'll do. Okay, so what I'm thinking is come here, try to put my rook on this file instead, or its rank, I forget which, it's file or rank. And then see if I can utilize this as much as I can. No, I don't want to trade down yet. Okay. Now, this is what you call a support point, or something like that. Very good places to put your knights. Always want to make sure they're adequately protected when they're doing their job. Or, again, most of the time that's the case. Now, if you're somebody like Alexander or Anderson, something like that, or Paul Morphy, they were fantastic at doing their pawn sacrifices and other piece sacrifices for that matter. Now, if you don't happen to be Paul Morphy, or if you don't happen to have that particular skill set, like me, then usually the safest option is the best. I'll keep that there. I'll move this here. Okay. And then I'll want to... This is very... iffy, probably. Okay. I'll just go here. Take this. Yep. Go here. Go here. Yep. Then here. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And then king can move up. Check. Check. Okay. Let's just go ahead and do that. Okay. Grab that. Grab this. Move this. Oh, and let's see. Okay. Oh. No! Stalemate. Okay. Alright. Sometimes it happens like that. Sometimes it be like that. Okay, so back to the contemplation part of things, shall we? Oh yeah, Dopio said LOL. I'm not sure at what point that was, but yes, LOL definitely. Oi, I still need to get better at doing chess on the laptop. It's a very different aesthetic feel from doing it on the phone, and it's very different from doing it on a physical chess set. So you have to get better. So right, back to the political is personal idea. Earlier this week, I was thinking about doing a video incorporating the following elements: on the brokenness of the copyright system, on the dysfunction of YouTube's content ID policies, and notice that I've bolded and underlined right and identity, because they're part of these phrases, but if we say them really fast, we might skip over those. And I wanted to incorporate something on investigating the concept of originality pertaining to the finite amount of musical tones and chord progressions that we can compile and arrange, and so on. I was thinking about sample videos from folks like Rick Beato, who's done videos on copyright strike takedowns and his ways of trying to amend various claims from the YouTube system. He's a music educator. He needs to use clips from lots of different folks, from Bach to Pink Floyd and so on. And although he cares about licensing tracks and so on and so forth, and he's a lot more knowledgeable in that area than I am, it's still a problematic field. As well, I was thinking about, recently I watched Mr. Tom Scott's video on how YouTube's copyright system isn't broken, the world's is. So that's a little bit of a wordplay. I guess apparently YouTube's content ID system is supposed to be like a mediator between a lot of independent creators and bigger music publisher labels and lobbies and so on. So it can get very complicated very quickly. So I'm at least thankful that in terms of intention, YouTube's content ID system is supposed to be a mediator, but more often than not, it seems like a very problematic area of sharing content, let's say, when it comes to politics. However, I thought that instead of going into all that on a more or less in-depth level, it would be far better to get more toward the roots of such issues. To start asking publicly, what are rights? What is identity? Or, as Mr. Rob Bell likes to say, the thing behind the thing. So, when we say rights, what's behind what we say when we say that word? And for all of us, we probably have different multiverses, maps of meaning as we come to approach words like these. And I'd like us to kind of take stock, get out the clipboard and do the inventory. Where do we get these ideas from? How many ideas in stock are happening, are in play when we just bring up these two words, rights and identity? To quote a little bit more from If Grace is an Ocean, We're All Drowning, and I'll show you what that page looks like super quick. Bum, bum, bum. Okay, it came up on this other screen up here on my external monitor, so I'll move it down here so you can see it. So it's from this website, and I'm going to quote a little bit from there. This writer was saying, I'll start by giving credit where credit's due. I got the phrase and idea from the thing behind the thing from Rob Bell. Me too. By the way, there's an Epic Poets, Prophets, Preachers playlist on YouTube. And even if you're not a preacher, even if you're just, you consider yourself as like a creator or an influencer, go to there. Because if anybody knows how to, or ought to know how to keep content flowing on a weekly basis and keep people's attention, it's preachers and pastors. So this writer continues, the thing behind the thing is the root reason, story, or experience behind why we individually do or think something. The driving impulse leading a group or movement a certain direction and the like. It's what's left when you peel back the layers of the metaphoric onion to get at the core issue behind something, the real motivation for an action or thought, and so on. So, we might ask, how does politics relate to identity and class? Well, cue Dr. Richard Beck, who's a professor of psychology at Abilene Christian University. This screenshot is probably a little bit too small for you to read, so I'm going to go ahead and just bring it up here and expand the text so that you can read with me. Let's go to my point here. Okay. And I'm going to... Okay. My point here is that... Oh, by the way, this is in a series on... as he calls it, post-progressive Christianity. And this is a particular article on class. So he says, my point here is that by ignoring class and focusing so much on identity, progressives often falter or sputter when it comes to concrete policy recommendations. And let me push even farther here, even harder. Many progressives decry moral solutions to address systemic injustices. And yet, when you look at what many progressives recommend by way of justice, they tend to recommend what they object to. Moral imperatives to solve systemic problems. For example, the frequent calls to check your privilege, educate yourself, be a better ally, or to stand in solidarity are moral imperatives rather than systemic policy fixes. Shifting focus to economics may look like you're taking your eye off the intersectional ball, but I'm convinced that economic justice is the quickest, most effective, and most direct path toward empowerment for all oppressed groups. Now, he's going to go on to say a lot more interesting things. He's a very fascinating guy. I love him. And we happen to come from the same Stone Campbell restoration movement sort of cluster of background. So I'm always glad to read what he has to say. And so yeah, when we think about politics, identity, rights, class, and words like these, I think he's got a point. I think that we can't delve into politics without having conversations about morality or ethics. And I don't think that we can have conversations about morality or ethics without also going to religion and various religious perspectives. I happen to be a Christian, but I totally think that Hindus and Buddhists and Sikhs and Muslims and others should be included in this conversation. By the way, go read your Bhagavad Gita, go read your Tao Te Ching and things like this. I think that religious literacy is imperative, not just in your own tradition, but in all these sorts of traditions, if we want to have productive, respectful, nuanced conversations. Also, I want to ask, so let's take the Prohibition during the 1940s or so, the Prohibition movement. Now, that was a vast movement, nuanced movement, but maybe the cartoonish version in your head, in my head, is often like, so some people got together and wanted to promote abstinence from alcohol and sorts of beverages like that, and they were thinking by instituting a mass policy that this would be effective. Was it, though? So at some level, I think we do need to come back to the political is personal. We need some sort of attention grabber that speaks to you and I on the individual level. But how do you get this to happen on a global scale? How do you get this individually touching attention grabber to happen across individuals all around the globe? And that's where I think, even though I like the political is personal slogan, I love this phraseology, and I think it's a bit more helpful. And I'm going to read that to you. Within The Guardian, there was an article on religious traditions and our common humanity. And I guess there was this Reverend Dr. Donald W. Norwood who wrote this portion, and I've highlighted a little bit, but I'll go ahead and read the whole thing. This dude commented, "Your editorial on the rise of Christian nativist populists offers an excellent exposition of Paul and the gospel, but it underrates a bad effect of the Enlightenment. If it promoted the separation of church and state, it also encouraged the assumption that religion has nothing to do with politics, and so created a vacuum that Christian populists like Trump and Orban have been quick to exploit. In the last century, two great Christian thinkers in Oxford, A.D. Lindsay and Nathaniel Micklem, found it hard to decide whether to become ordained ministers or members of parliament. Think about that for a second. Both seemed to them equally important Christian vocations. Lindsay opted for politics, but based his resistance to Hitler's tyranny on his Christian faith. And in his I Believe in Democracy, Micklem, as a theologian and principal of a theological college, argued in his Theology of Politics that all political problems are at bottom theological, because they raise questions about our relation to God, other human beings, and all creation. As you urge, such convictions need to be more powerfully shared. So, again, all political problems are at bottom theological. That is the proposition that I am advancing is more helpful than the political is personal. It's not to say I don't like or that I disagree with or that I find the political is personal phrase unhelpful. I think it is helpful. But I think that this phrase, all political problems are at bottom theological, is a much better framing for these discussions. So, for my progressive-leaning friends, you might appreciate, for instance, when Renegade Cut talks about we should talk about the devil, or Christian martyr complex, God's not dead, a light in darkness. Or he did another video, I think he touched on some things pertaining to some iterations of millennialism and premillennialism within this video, global capitalism, rich nations on poor nations. I think he did. But it's been a couple years since I've watched those. Or some of my progressive friends might like Chris Hedges when he talks about the Empire of Illusion, or other videos that he's done. Usually he tries to talk about, from what little I know about him, he tries to talk about the intersection of faith and politics. Or, yet again, you might like the 0 Hour with R.J. Eskow. And there's a particular episode which caught my attention more than some of the others. It was Lynn Paramore asking, is capitalism a religion? Are we human sacrifice? So, for those of you who are more progressive leaning, you might like those resources. And they all try to say this point, more or less, that all political problems are theological at bottom. Now, for both of my progressive and conservative friends, I think you should check out this interview with Jonathan Pageau, an Eastern Orthodox carver and brilliant guy. Love him. He's fantastic. He does conversations with people like Paul Vanderklay and lots of other people. Hashtag at this little corner of the internet. Hashtag estuary. But in this interview, I'm not going to say it, but SHT, you know what it says, Cray. And I'm not going to do this to keep this more family friendly. In this episode, I think they touch on the intersection between theology and politics extremely well, and highly recommend go check it out. I think you would have a lot of fun listening to this one. Oh, cool. Isabella asks, how are you doing? I'm not sure when she asked that, but thankfully doing pretty good. I'm glad to be alive, glad to be here doing this. And how are you doing? let me bring it right back to you. I'd love to hear your comments and concerns, and laughs and fears, joys, memes. So go ahead and check out my Abyssus Abyssum Invocat Discord group if you haven't already. And I've included the link earlier in this show, but I'll include it again when I do the episode description. But yeah, back to Jonathan Pageau. So he's done some excellent articles and podcasts via the Symbolic World. Highly recommend, go check it out. Here are just a couple suggestions. The Symbolic World versus Egregore series, two-parter, and relatedly, Cameron Dixon's Substack article on Santa Claus as the hypostasis of Christmas. It's brilliant, fantastic exposition of Jonathan Pageau's videos pertaining to Santa Claus. Anyway, yeah. Back to the chess for a little bit, and then we'll get back to the contemplation. Okay, so, right. Let's do another chess game here. All right, I'll do e5, take that, do this, this. Yep, he opened up with pawn. Okay. So pawn structure sort of looks like it's going to go in this direction, so I might castle this way. Okay. Alright, so just going to try doing an attack on this end. Okay. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and... I don't recommend this often, but sometimes in blitz games it is useful. Just try to open up the other side's territory a little bit. Sometimes it's helpful. It could turn out that this is a very bad idea in this case. Okay. Okay. Alright, so now what I want to do is probably just move here. Now, he'll probably want to do this. Okay. And I will go ahead and just... I know he's going to take that, so I'll just go ahead and block myself in. Okay, so let's see. And typically, like if you were going to see me do 2 hour per side chess, I typically like my close positions a lot more. I gravitate towards Steinitz's way of playing, Wilhelm Steinitz, but I need to get better. I always need to get better at my blitz and my tactics, so yeah. Mm-hmm. Might do the rook there. Maybe. We'll see. Yep, he did do that. Okay, so now I'm just going to move this here. I've got this pin. Maybe I could use that at some point. Let's just do this. Okay. I'll do that. Okay, now this is getting very hot. Don't want to be mated, so I'm just gonna open that up a little bit, and then I'm gonna do this. Oh, not good, not good, not good. Very, very bad, very bad, very bad. Oh no, I should have seen that. Oi. Oh well. Make the best of it. Haha. Okay. That's also not good. Okay. Yeah. And mate. Yay, I've been mated. Okay, let's try another one. All right. Okay, so okay. Okay. All right. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and do another one, and then I'll get back to the contemplation. All right. So nothing like keeping the other player in suspense. Okay. Cool. Bum-ba-da-bum. Need to watch out for that potential check. Angles, geometry, but I'll go ahead and do this. Maybe do this next. Now, okay, he's moving over there. Like super hot fire, very quick like. Go ahead and move there. Okay. And let's, I prefer this because there are more points of opening things up. If I'd just gone to h6, then, well, that would be less points of attack. Okay. Now I think at long last I will castle. Okay. Go ahead and attack that there. Two options. Maybe I could go there, or maybe I can go there. This case, I'll go here. And totally got my queen taken, but I'll go ahead and just roll with it. If I can model anything, hopefully, it's to lose with tact. And that's also bad. Let's make it a little less bad. You can still take... Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay. And mate. There we go. All right, so back to the contemplation. Right, so we were talking about the political is personal, and then about how, as helpful as that is, I think a more helpful phrase is something like, at bottom, all political problems are theological. And earlier on, I talked about the introductions of both of those quotes. So now let's zoom in on this phrase again, and I'm going to quote from Leonard Hodgson's entry here on the Theology of Politics by Nathaniel Micklem, who is referenced in that previous article I read about. I got this from JSTOR through the CSUSM proxy. JSTOR is awesome. So anyway, within this article, which may be a little bit small for some of you to read, but let me go ahead and remedy that super quick. I'm going to bring it up over here, and I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit. So within the Theology of Politics by Nathaniel Micklem, he had this quote: "All political problems are at bottom theological. No political theory is likely to affect deeply the conduct or outlook of man unless it be reinforced by the sanctions of religion. Thus, my purpose is to indicate the outlines of a doctrine of society which," and at this point I'll go ahead and bring up this other continuation of that quote. Give me just a second here. "Which makes its appeal to the reason and conscience of humane and civilized men, but is also an effective answer to Marxist materialism and Nazi racialism, because that which is consonant with reason may be apprehended as the will of the living God revealed in the teaching of Jesus Christ." So, that's a quote from the Theology of Politics, and it, I think, vibes really well. Vibes, again, musical term for those of you following the universal music and cymatics train of thought, which I'm trying to expound upon in multiple places throughout my YouTube channels and blog posts. I think this vibes very well with the stuff that we heard early on in this episode from Dr. Richard Beck and from that Nationalist Socialist Review article. Anyway, now that I've paved, or I haven't paved it, but I've showed the road being paved from politics to religion, and specifically Christianity. So this leads me to read this poem that's in progress, and I'd like for, if you like it, then thank you. And if you have any ideas as to where I should take this, let me know. Anyway, so this is a poem in progress, and I'm going to go ahead and pull that up for you. I created this as an assignment for, I don't know, it was like a year or two ago, literature and writing studies BA. Here's a tale told in the style of the Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer. And I was trying to imagine what since Mr. Chaucer had so many characters, and since he didn't get around to a few of them, part of the assignment was trying to figure out if you were going to write in one of those characters who didn't get any lines, what would your story look like? So this is what I concocted, and I'm going to zoom in here just a little bit more so that you can see maybe a little bit better. Okay, so yeah, in the Old English, this is an exposition more or less of lines 163 through 164 of Mr. Chaucer's general prologue to his Canterbury Tales. There are these lines. Another nun with hair had she, that was here a chaplain and a priestess 3. So that's Chaucer, and that's early English for you. And so I think Chaucer wrote stuff for 2 of the 3 priests, but here's one for the 3rd priest. Canterbury Tale imitation for you. The 3rd priest's tale. And I'm going to go ahead and I'll just keep it on the same Moobert music. I just might turn it down a little bit so you can maybe hear it a little bit better. Let's go back here and go here. Just a little bit lower. Not that much. Okay, so 3rd priest's tale. Here we go. Once upon a time, happily ever before, according to the thrilling lore, the followers of the Way, an intriguing economy, did display. In the midst of Rome's taxations and discriminations, in the midst of Rome's inequalities and incarcerations, and in the midst of Rome's slave trade system, these musicians played to a different rhythm. To properties and houses and personal possessions they bid adieu, as they their receipts and revenues to the apostles did shew. Thenceforth the funds were reallocated to be weighted toward those most in need, and such acts of charity meant great things indeed, including this, that poverty diminished as fidelity augmented. Oh, such awe and wonder and power and grace and gladness fomented. Every day, holistic salvation and healing liberation were occurring. Every day, delicious potlucks and nutritious agape feasts were recurring. Yea, daily would they in temples congregate. Yea, daily they would the apostles' doctrines contemplate. Aye, day by day and night by night they would pray and worship. Aye, and morn by morn and eve by eve they would hooray and serve up. But what could have caused such emotional and rational unity? And what could have roused such distributional and communal charity? Yea, what could have stirred such eloquent embodiments and integral incarnations? The more I meditate upon such pulchritudinous policies and outstanding operations, the more I muse upon such themes as those which I shall share presently. And I hope these reflections shall come across quite pleasantly. Firstly, I think and feel about identity and personality. Secondly, I think and feel about intentionality and missionality. Having said as much, wilt thou join me in wandering on in wonder? Or, imagining we were ichthys fishes, wilt thou join me in swimming on ere deeper? Let us venture on in the sweetness of humility, and let us travel on in the meekness of curiosity. Firstly, let us consider identity and personality. More specifically, may our emotionality and mentality consider oneness, connectedness, and nobleness. By the aid of these three themes, may we improve in fineness. So, at that point, I was intending to refer to two Middle English cultural historical conventions, chivalry and courtly love. Anyway, I continue on. On oneness, let us begin by recalling the gospel account ascribed to St. John, how Christ Jesus, sometime before his assassination, ruminated upon his fervent desire that all may be one as he and his Father were one, and his passionate craving for e'er more interpenetrating intimacies to be one. Next, let us consider that epistle to the Galatians, wherein St. Paul professes thusly, I have been crucified with Christ. He confesses truly. I no longer live, he goes on to declare, for Christ lives in me. He would have us cheerfully beware. Then, let us continue on to consider how St. Paul also sincerely held with the philosophical poet Epimenides, who similarly beheld that in God we live, move, and exist. Further, a prayer attributed to St. Patrick did, on a similar theme, persist. Christ with me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ in me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me. Still further, Christ on my right and Christ on my left. It proceeds. And yet further, Christ when I lay down, Christ when I sit down. It succeeds. Christ when I arise, it aspires. With winsome words they evoke like musical pieces played with lyres. Christ in the heart of every man who thinks of me. Christ in the mouth of everyone who speaks of me. And, for good measure, let us ponder this last couplet of lines, which can stir souls like well-aged wines. Christ in every eye that sees me. Christ in every ear that hears me. Although so much remains that could be said, let us pause this dialectical movement by partaking of this ideological bread. The eye with which I see God, St. Meister Eckhart shares, is the same eye with which God sees me. Further, he declares, my eye and God's eye are one eye, one seeing, one knowing, and one love. Now, I went on and shared this outline for a continuation, which was going to talk more about interconnectedness, and Paul about in Christ there is no slave versus free, no male versus female, and exploring that territory where all men join women in femininity with relation to the masculinity of Christ, and then not that God is strictly masculine, but that God challenges us and breaks down our dichotomies and refines our vision. And then I was going to tie this to Christian animism and Alpha Plantinga, and Genesis about the blood crying out, and Psalms about commands for creation, praising God, and the St. Francis prayer, and so on. But the only next part that I've fleshed out a bit more is this. On nobleness, let us now contemplate. Shall we rape-related chivalry approbate? Or shall we scandal-affiliated courtly love laud? To the extent in which both activities are flawed, let us neither express contentedness nor acedia toward abusers. Rather, let us seek to both rebuke and mend such diffusers, as well as to help and defend the abused and diffused. In any and all cases, shall we not work to edify the tormentors and the tormented? For is it not true that both writhe in different modes? Yea, is it not true that we ought to mature in carrying in each other's loads? Moreover, is it not true that sooner or later all suffer if one suffers? Aye, let us become different kinds of knights and lovers. E'en if we be mocked, let us become e'er more composed. Let the sagacity of the unjust be by the stupidity of the just o'erturned. Can it be that faithful love and truth have met? To quote from a psalmist, and that righteousness and peace have kissed, to continue with that sophist. If we can harmonize with St. Gregory of Nyssa that sin is the failure to grow, shall we not mature in realizing the mysterious music within which we flow? And then, of course, I had another movement planned out that I didn't quite get to fleshing out yet. Actually, another few movements. And then I guess I was going to tie it all to John Ball, but I didn't quite get to that. John Ball had this epic little sermon, and it moved the people where he was at. The very poor people, poor lowly people, loved him. He said truth. They would murmur one with another in the fields and in the ways as they went together, affirming how John Ball spoke the truth. So he was a medieval preacher who knew who to tap in a balanced way between religion and politics, between theology and politics. In fact, this is a great short sermon. I might as well read this and then get back to some chess. Aye, ye good people, things are not going well in England, nor shall they do so till everything be common, until there be no villains nor gentlemen, but we be all united together, and the lords be no greater masters than we be. What have we deserved, or why should we be kept thus in serfdom? We be all come from one father and one mother, Adam and Eve. Whereby can they say or show that they be greater lords than we be, except that they cause us to earn and labor for what they spend? They are clothed in velvet and camlet furred with grease, and we be vestured with poor cloth. They have their wines, spices, and good bread, and we have the drawing out of the chaff and drink water. They dwell in fair houses, and we have the pain and travail, rain and wind in the fields. And by what cometh of our labours? They keep and maintain their estates. We be called their bondmen, and unless we readily do them service, we be beaten. And we have no sovereign to whom we may complain, nor that will hear us and do us right. Let us go to the king, he is young, and show him what serfage we be in, and show him how we will have it otherwise, or else we will provide us with some remedy, either by fairness or otherwise. Okay, well, slight amendment. I did say that he knew how to balance theology and politics. I think 90% of that sermon was probably on the good side, and I favor the non-violence. But toward the end there, either by fairness or otherwise, I feel kind of iffy on that line. And I think St. Paul, if he were to chime in here, he would say, the abusers and the tyrants, they should not be doing abusing and tyranting. And do what little you can to try to live in the kingdom of God in your little corner. But not much is going to be accomplished by these violent mobs. So I think St. Paul would say something to that extent. Think about the kingdom of God. Kingdom of God matters more. Anyway, so that was a little poetry project that was in progress. It still is. I still need to develop more of it. But anyway, that was inspired by a number of biblical passages. And I want to go ahead and read some of those. And by the way, I did do a blog post on that poem at one point, and you can see my footnotes as to what quotes went with which author and so on. And if you have any questions as you're listening to this, go ahead and let me know, and I can try to search for that link again so that it'll be more convenient for you. But anyway, I was inspired to write that poem because of passages like Acts 2:42 through 47, 4:32 through 45, as well as Galatians 2:20 and 1 Corinthians 6:19 through 20. And these read, They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. All the believers were one in heart and mind. No one claimed that any of their possessions was their own, but they shared everything they had. With great power, the apostles continued to testify to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus. And God's grace was so powerfully at work in them all that there were no needy persons among them. For from time to time, those who owned land or houses sold them, brought the money from the sales, and put it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to anyone who had need. Now, if you look at some other church fathers on possessions. I forget where exactly I like to quote from, but there's a fantastic link on this. Anyway, so Chrysostom is one of those guys, and let me go ahead and quote from some of these here. Let me just disable my ad blocker. Hold on just a sec. Refresh. Chrysostom. Not to enable the poor to share in our goods is to steal from them and deprive them of life. The goods we possess are not ours, but theirs. St. Basil the Great also said, "The bread in your cupboard belongs to the hungry man. The coat hanging in your closet belongs to the man who needs it. The shoes rotting in your closet belong to the man who has no shoes. The money which you put out into the bank belongs to the poor. You do wrong to everyone you could help but fail to help." Anyway, church fathers were no slouches when it came to providing for the poor. And they not only talked the talk, but they walked the walk. Now, if you look at me, I have books and books and books. Actually, behind me, I can't move my, let's see if I can move this just a little bit. So behind me, behind my chair, I have books and books and books and books. I tell you, I do not need all of those books. I have clothes and clothes and clothes. I do not need all of those clothes. So, after reading those quotes, I think it's important to preach to myself a little bit. Let me go ahead and reposition this thingamajig here. So, point is, I'm not saying this to make you feel bad. I'm not saying this, I feel bad, but I'm not saying this to make you feel bad. It's more like, if we're going to think about politics and about ethics and about theology and all of these things, let's take it seriously. And this is a call to myself, probably more than it is to anyone. But if it's helpful to you, then great. I want to get better at, I used to, as a Boy Scout, I used to do some community service, more community service than I do now, unfortunately. And it's always a joy getting to help people, making sandwiches for the poor. And I know there are probably a lot more helpful ways to help people. And I know this gets very complicated very quickly as you've got all these different agencies, some of which are more helpful than others. And people send money to agencies, but some of them don't actually really help out the poor much. So I know a senior at the senior center where I play piano who has been a social worker, and she tells me that's the case too. So I know that these conversations can get really tricky very quickly. But so yeah. Now, again, as we think about the people in Acts, and as we think about, well, how can we go about better living and being better seekers of the kingdom, and or if you prefer, better seekers of utopia, not dystopia, not a dystopia pretending to be utopia. I mean legit utopia. How do we get there? And I think this is a picture. And how did the early church do this sort of thing? Well, they invested in teachings like St. Paul exposited in, say, Galatians and 1 Corinthians. Paul says, I've been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. Or in another place, and actually let me expand the text a little bit more. Do you not know that this is Paul speaking to Christians, not to non-Christians, but to Christians. This is important to point out because Paul is more strict with Christians than he is with non-Christians. And this is a theme within the Old Testament as well. God is more strict with the Jewish people than with surrounding nations. Read the prophets. This is a theme. Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you've received from God? You are not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies. You are not your own. Or to personalize it, I am not my own. Now, I'm doing this stream, and my hope is that it's helping, pleasing, edifying, entertaining to y'all, whether you're listening now or will listen in the future. And my hope is that, well, it's a multifaceted hope. But to myself, I'm saying, I am not my own. I am your servant. I am yours. Most especially to God, but also to y'all. I am here for you. And I suppose that I think if we're going to effectively and productively live into utopia, the kingdom of God, this is a root issue. This is a core issue. When we talk about politics, when we talk about rights and identity, I think this is the best starting place. That we're more or less, as the High School Musical movie put it, we're all in this together. It's Paul also talks about how the ecclesia, the church, is like a body, and you need fingers, and the fingers are different from the eyes, and the eyes are different from the ears. Now, if the ears say, I don't need you to the fingers, that's not going to work. And if maybe the ears say, I don't see why I'm needed, but the fingers say, man, I wish I was an ear, because ears can do all those sorts of things that I can't. Or, I think that trees often say this to stars, and stars say this to trees. The stars say, I wish I was a tree. And the trees say, I wish I was a star. point is, a better perspective is we're all in this together. None of us are adequate or sufficient as an island unto ourselves. And of course, as a constantly repenting and hopefully improving Christian who also respects lots of other religions and who still thinks that Christianity is the best, the most true, I think that if we're going to do any effective change, we need to adopt this sort of mentality that Paul is talking about. I think this spills out into the sort of economy that we see in Acts chapters 2 and 4. Don't need to tear down the system, just live differently. It starts with all of us individually. So anyway, that's the penultimate thing. Back to the chest, though, for just a little bit, and then I'll give one last set of quotes to end on, which are a lot shorter. So, back to the chest. And it says I've been disconnected, so I'm going to refresh. All right, let's do a new game. And by the way, I'm using DMCA approved royalty-free music from Moobert. And I guess Moobert had a deal with Restream, which is one software that I'm using right now to stream to all these different platforms. Last time I got a little bit carried away and I did a little bit of a modern recording of Haydn. Yeah, it was Haydn who did The Heavens Are Telling the Glory of God. Mm-hmm. And I'm doing this just so that I can go here because I know he wants to castle this way, but may turn out not to work out very well. Queen takes, I move, queen goes there. No, won't do that because that. Even after all of these years of playing chess, I never stop learning. Oh, bad. He can just go there and then mate. Let's see if he does that. Yeah. Yeah, okay. And I mated. Okay. Let's try another one. Looking at that pawn there. Looking at that spot there. Okay. Also looking at that spot there. If I can do check and get that rook, that would be nice, but never, here's this. Almost never count on a tactic to work and always think about backup plans. That's a chess skill that's been serving me pretty well since I was a more active United States Chess Federation tournament player when I was younger. And it's like in life. Always have a backup plan. Okay. Yeah, that checks out. I'm going to castle here so that I can double up on this space. Now, I know that I didn't take the rook there, but sometimes it's better to just, like, double up on all these different options. Or, like, tactic overwhelm. That's probably another good phrase. Tactic overwhelm. Okay. So now I'm going to move this out of harm's way and put this there. Check. This way, I still can grab that. Queen takes, I take. Okay. Ooh, better, maybe, is here. Okay. Check. Check. That way, I've got that connection. Okay. And then, yeah, I'll just go ahead and grab that. Yeah, you can do that. Yeah, I know. I'm doing this. Okay. I'll move that out of harm's way. Ooh, I could have just done that. I could have just taken that pawn and gone for the mate, but no, I had to go the hard way. Let's bring that back to the support point. Do that. Probably move one of his knights up to here. Yeah, there we go. I'll move this over here. Probably should have moved it over there, though, come to think of it. Okie dokie. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and do this. He'll probably take the bishop at some point, or not. He'll do that. Okay. Ooh. There's an idea. Check. And then, there's an idea. And then, let's just take that. This takes that. I go here. Grab this. Grab this. Yep. Come here. there. Let's do this. I try never to resign a game because to some degree you do never know how these things are going to turn out. So, handshake there. Thank you, Anuja. Okay, so I should probably work on ending this stream pretty soon. And I said that I wanted to share some quotes to end on. Let me go ahead and refresh the chat because sometimes it's a little bit on the slow side to update. Let's see here. Nope. Okay. All good. All right. So earlier on in this episode, I mentioned Jonathan Pageau. And Jonathan Pageau, as an Eastern Orthodox Christian, he's done conversations with, I think his name is Friar Stephen Freeman, who I think runs ancientfaith.com. And I wanted to read some quotes from this particular article. So let me go ahead and bring this up so that you can see what it looks like. Okay. Yeah, Friar Stephen Freeman. In February 18th of this year, so not long ago, he wrote this article on the poetry of God, and I was like, ooh, I have to quote from this. I have to. So here you go. I just collated some quotes from there, and the first one is the one that he opens with. Whoever wants to become a Christian must first become a poet. That makes me want to learn a lot more about Saint Porphyrios of Kavsakalia. Porphyrios. Say that 10 times fast. Kavsakalia. Ooh, that's tricky. So go check him out. I'm going to try to check him out later. And here's another quote from Friar Stephen Freeman. He says, "The lover speaking to the beloved is seeking words for what cannot be spoken. The very inexpressible quality of thought and emotion demands words in the irony that is poetic expression. Theology easily transcends the boundaries of romance. Rightly expressed, theology always speaks the unspeakable." So, again, let's grab some ideas here. So, politics, if the root of all political problems is at bottom theological, and if Christianity professes the best religious model, the best theological models, and if Christianity promotes the beauty of being together and of renouncing personal identity and personal rights, personal possessions, in favor of following Christ and being consistent, robustly, and circumspectly. If poetry is at the heart of Christianity, if theology transcends the boundaries of romance and the poetry of romance, then let's press forward. I have repeatedly pressed this point because I think that mystery is not only an aspect of the divine, but part of the nature of all reality. Everything is far more than it appears. With the heart of a poet, St. Gregory of Nyssa asserts, only wonder understands anything. The role of wonder is, among other things, to slow us down, make us quiet, and help us pay attention. Now, attention is a word that comes up a lot in conversations featuring Paul Vanderklay and Jonathan Pageau and John Vervaeke and a number of other folks. So, as well as Dr. Richard Beck, who I cited earlier. So on the theme of wonder, and with all of this that I've talked about, and with these chess games, I think I lost most of those today. Stalemated once, and maybe one game. I think it's probably about high time to end the stream. But as a bonus, let me go ahead and do a quick 1 minute chess game. How's about that? Quick 1 minute chess game. Let me play one of those. 1 minute chess game. All right, here we go. Okay. All right. Let's do check. Back. Okay, so he's probably going to attack this way, more or less. And I'm going to open up here. Okay. Then just plop this here. And ooh, this is getting very cramped. He could just move his pawn there. Yeah. All right, so might as well go here. All right, and then here. Pawn takes, knight takes. Good thing I stuck that there. 10 seconds to go. Ooh, not good, not good. Take that. Yep, okay, out of time. All right, so another lesson is know when to quit. I should have known when to quit. But anyway, thank you for being you. Thank you for listening at any point during the stream. Let me know in the comments what you think about any of the themes we talked about, or suggestions for some other quotes, and hope you're having a wonderful week. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And let me go ahead and press the stop streaming button. May the force be with you. The force of God be with you. And may the odds be always evermore in your favor. Leston out.